Well, hello everyone. We are back with another reading wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in May. And yes, once again, I'm very late with this wrap-up, but you know, we're just going to roll with it. I read a total of 6 books. I only have 5 physical books here because I read the one on Kindle. Most of these books I read for Amanda's Southern Charm Readathon. I didn't quite get all of the books read on my TBR that I wanted to, so I didn't quite fulfill all of the challenges, but I would try to remember to mention the prompt that the book fulfilled when I'm talking about it. But the first book that I finished in May was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys, and this one was for the prompt of Bless Your Heart, an emotional or heartwarming book. And let me tell you, this book was very emotional. It was heartwarming in a sense with the ending in a way, but I would say it was definitely more heavy, sad emotions because we follow Lena and her family as they are taken from their homes by the Soviets when the Soviets took over Lithuania, and are put into cattle cars and shipped to Siberia. So we're basically just following Lena and her brother and her mom on their journey in the cattle cars to the different labor camps, and then eventually on to Siberia. And the whole time that through every step of the journey, Lena she's an artist, and so she's drawing pictures, first on a little handkerchief that she has, that she's hoping to pass along to people to eventually get back to her dad so that he can find them because they were separated. They don't know where her father ended up. But yeah, it's a heartbreaking story. Just all of the hardships that they faced, and yeah, but I really did enjoy it. I rated it 5 stars. I love Rita's writing, and I love the amount of research that goes into her books to like accurately depict what people went through in certain periods of history that she's writing about. But yeah, it was wow. One of the thoughts that came to my mind while I was reading this book was that our lives are not easy here on this earth because of sin and the brokenness that came with it. And I have faced some hard things in my life, and God cares about even the smallest things that we go through that are hard and difficult for us, because I know He cares about it. But reading this story made me realize how blessed I actually am to live here in a country with freedoms, and like not having to live in fear of someone coming into my home and taking me away and shipping me off to some foreign country with my daughter, with my little baby who's only 4 months old. There was a lady in here that was shipped in the cattle car with Lena and her family, who had just given birth. She was literally taken from the hospital, had her with her newborn baby, and put into a cattle car. Wow. This book really made me cry, actually, and just thinking about it now is just like imagining that happening to me after just having my daughter and being shipped on this cattle car, on this train to another country, and having to try to take care of a brand new tiny little baby, and yeah, just as a trigger warning and everything, the baby ends up dying because there were complications with nursing, and the baby couldn't eat, and it literally starved to death. And then the mom lost her mind, and the soldiers ended up killing her. because she was just like all humans to these Soviet soldiers were pretty much easily dispensable. Like, just let's get rid of them if they brought no value to them. Yeah, I don't know. It was just, I know that people, like, I've read so many stories set during World War II and everything, and all of the hardships that those people faced. I've read so many different stories, and so I was aware of how difficult things were for them in a sense, but it never really hit me so hard as it has now that I'm a mom, now that I have a daughter, and to think about all of the moms who had to think about their children going through all of these things, and like the amount of worry that I feel now for my daughter, if she's sick or if things aren't going right, if I'm wondering if I'm doing things right as a mom, does not even compare to the worry that these moms faced, and having to try to protect their children, and also just seeing their children ripped from their arms, and like just going through all of these hard things. I don't know, it just put a different perspective on things for me, and just showed me, like I said, how truly blessed I am. That yes, I do face hard things, but again, I'm so blessed to not, that I don't actually have to deal with those insane fears that these moms face, like going through all of this. Yeah, like I was just really grateful for that perspective change. But again, I don't want to dismiss like the hard things that we do face here, even while we live in a country with so many freedoms. I know that there are hard things that we face every day, and I don't want to dismiss those things. But yeah, I hope you're hearing my heart. It was just a good perspective change for me to not just be so focused on myself and the hard things that I'm facing, and realizing that there are so many other people, even now in other countries, that are facing hard things, and my heart just breaks for the moms out there that have to see their children go through these things. And I don't know, yeah. I hope that makes sense. But anyway, I do highly recommend it, but I will say all of the trigger warnings, there's death, there's abuse, there's so many different things that these people faced on their trip on their journey, being shipped to Siberia and the labor camps there. But it was a beautiful story and a beautiful ending in spite of all of the hard things that they faced. But yes, that is Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. Then the next one that I read was The Doctor's Lady by Jody Hedlund. I had mentioned in my TBR video that I hadn't read any of Jody's books, but I went back on my Goodreads and discovered that I had, and I gave them very low ratings. I think it was just one other book that I read, and I actually rated it only 1 star because I did not, yeah, we're not here to talk about that book. But this one, I started taking notes while I was reading these books so I can actually do a better job of describing, talking about the book and talking about my thoughts about the book, you know? But in this book we follow Priscilla. She is wanting to become a missionary, and her dream and plan was to go to India to be a missionary. But the mission board decided she was not allowed to go to India because she was not married, and there are reasons that she has pretty much decided that she's not going to get married, which I'm not going to spoil. But yes, she is basically told that the only way she can be a missionary is that she has to get married. And so one Sunday, a man shows up at church with 2 Native Americans, 2 young boys, and he is talking about the missions that he's wanting to do for the Native American tribes out west. And this was before any women went on the Oregon Trail or moved west, so it was definitely a little bit more uncivilized back in that time. And he was also told the same thing, basically, that he has to have a wife to go, and so they end up just getting married for that specific, mostly just because they needed to be married to be able to be missionaries and to start a mission. And Eli is his name, if I remember correctly. Yes, Eli. He's actually a doctor, and so he's going more for the medical side of things, to bring medicine to the Native Americans. But anyway, I ended up only rating this book 3 stars, and it could almost be dropped a little bit more, but I'm going to just leave it at 3 stars because overall it was a good story. I was really invested in the beginning because I do love the marriage of convenience, forced proximity type tropes, and so I was really invested in the beginning because I wanted just to see what happens, and following their journey on the wagon trail to the west. But the longer it went, it just seemed to kind of drag on, and there was just this lack of communication between them, and literally this entire book, sorry to spoil it, is literally they're still on the trail. Like, the book ends when they finally reach their destination, which was a little disappointing because I did want more of like their mission and like getting there with the tribes that they were going to be working with and setting up their mission, all of those things. So that was really disappointing. This book, the couple, Eli and Priscilla, are based on Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, so one of the first missionaries to the west to bring the gospel to the Native Americans there, and mostly focused on the first women who made it over the mountains on the Oregon Trail to the west. But yes, the few things that I didn't like I said, I started to get a little bored, and so that dropped the rating. But also, just as far as content goes, in the very beginning, they're referring to the Native Americans as savages and heathens, things like that, and I don't care for those terms because these people are humans. And I just don't care for that kind of language. It's very, to me, very dehumanizing and demeaning, and I didn't like it. But I will say, I don't think this is really the author's intent. So maybe it doesn't really matter that much, but it's just something that made me cringe a little bit, because the Dr. Eli actually refers to them as Native Americans, and he doesn't refer to them as with these demeaning terms or derogatory terms, but she does a lot, Priscilla, and she's very much has this, I don't even like to use this term either because it's overused, I think, on one side of things. Is the white savior complex, but I think there is an element to it because she had a very high, like, just I can't even say the word, superiority complex. Like, she just thought that her way of living was best and that she was there to help these people because they knew nothing and she was going to show them a better way of life. And I will say that there was a point that Eli looked to her and said that just because their ways are different does not mean they're less than our ways. So I appreciated that. I don't really think it's the author's actual mindset and how she views Native Americans. And another positive, though, too, was that they did acknowledge the horrible treatment that the Native Americans did suffer from the hands of white people. So there is that, at least. Some content warnings, though. There is a brief mention of sexual assault Eli, the male main character, his sisters were abused by his stepfather. And so there's just like a minor detail of that, like of a memory that he has of hearing this happen to his sisters and feeling like he can't do anything to help them or protect them. So there's that. And then also Priscilla at one point there is an attempted rape on her. So there's those trigger warnings. There were some negative things, there were some positive things. Mostly I did not like Priscilla's character as much because of her superiority complex of thinking that she just knew all of the things and that it was her mission to better the lives of other people, which is a good thing. We do want to help people who need help. But yeah, I don't know. I just didn't like her attitude. She did develop a little bit of humility in the end, but there wasn't enough character development for me to just really like her in the end either. So that was a little disappointing. Both of the characters, really, Eli and Priscilla. I liked Eli a little more, but both characters fell a little flat for me. There just wasn't much like depth to them. They were both starting to feel attracted to each other, but they weren't communicating that, and it was just a whole mess. I hate lack of communication. Just please. Can we all just grow up and communicate things? I struggle with it as well. I'm not perfect in this. Okay, I know that. But I don't really want to read about it either, so, you know? One of the things that I mentioned in my little note things was I could have handled less descriptions of their desire or hunger for each other. I don't like those words, okay? So please don't use them in books. Just stop, okay? But I will say a lot of the actual happenings events that happened in this book were based off of, like I said, Marcus and Narcissa Whitman's, and most of them were taken from Narcissa's personal journals of that she was writing on their journey west. So a lot of these happenings did kind of happen, even though it wasn't necessarily to Eli and Priscilla, because Eli and Priscilla are fictional characters. But I thought that aspect of the story was cool. But yeah, overall, it's just a 3-star book. Probably could be 2.5. It's good. I didn't love it. Probably won't think about it again. I know I won't be rereading this, and I will probably unhaul the book because it's not really one that I would just be like, oh, you should read this. Anyway, there's that. We're done talking about it now. Okay, so then the next book that I finished was Aberration by Cathy McCrumb, and this one was not in my TBR video for May, but I had just finished Recorder at the end of April, and I needed to pick up the second book immediately. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad my library had it on as an ebook. I read it on my Kindle. Oh goodness. I did not take any notes on that one, but because I read through it so fast. But here's my review. I loved it. 5 stars. Just as good as the first one. Wow. It pretty much picks up where Recorder left off. But Recorder is on a different station, and so there are a lot of new characters that we're introduced to in the beginning of the book, which was a little confusing right at first, but for me it wasn't that difficult to figure out who everyone was, what was going on, all the things. But I can't give spoilers. I can't really talk about what this book is about because you have to read the first one to know what's happening in the second one. But wow. Again, love the characters. I love the subtle faith content. I love the relationships, like the friendships, and also the romantic relationships. It's not heavy on the romance, but it's there, and it's sweet, and it's beautiful. Love it. But again, the ending, why do they get me? Every time. Heart just ripped open. And I need to know what happens because I haven't picked up the third book yet because my library does not have it. I need to know what happens. I will be getting the actual physical books eventually. I'm just waiting for them all to be out in paperback which is crazy. I know, I used to be all hardcover type of girl, but now I'm switching back to paperbacks because I like the floppiness, you know, easier to read, although the hardcovers are beautiful. But yeah, anyway, highly recommend the Recorder series. Please pick them up. Yeah, not going to talk much about the book again, because as far as talking about the plot and everything, because you do need to read the first one, and I don't want to give spoilers. It's just really good. Highly recommend. Love it. Moving on to the next one, Death at La Fenice by Donna Leon. This is the first book in the Guido Brunetti mystery series. It's set in Venice. Hello, Italy. Love it. And this one did fit the prompt for where I'm missing Heavens to Betsy, a mystery or thriller. So, my thoughts on this book. I love the writing style. It was so atmospheric, and like her descriptions of Venice and all of the scenes and everything, loved it. I could totally picture it in my mind. It was like I was there. Absolutely loved the writing style. As far as content, I rated this book 3 stars. I really did enjoy it, and for the most part, like I said, the writing style, the mystery was interesting, trying to figure out what happened. So basically, a really famous conductor is murdered, and so Guido Brunetti, the police commissario, is put on the case, and so he's trying to figure out who killed him and why, because he was a really famous conductor and everybody loved his conducting obviously in the opera world and everything. But yes, I was going to say maybe about 20% into the book, I was like, man, I'm loving this. There isn't any content in here that's making me uncomfortable. It was clean, all of the things. And I was like, is this a new secular mystery author that I could pick up some more of her books and love? And I was really excited. But of course not. And that content is, there were several characters who were homosexuals, and I don't mind that in a sense, as far as like, if that's going to be in a book, it's just briefly mentioned, it's not part of the actual storyline, I'm okay with that. But the thing that made me really uncomfortable was that he was interviewing one of the ladies, and there was a suspected lesbian relationship. It was never confirmed, because this is set back in the 50s or 60s, before it was generally accepted for people to be out about their homosexual relationships. But he was interviewing one of the ladies, and there's just all of a sudden a brief description of the interviewer, like the Guido. The detective on the case has a really like a kind of erotic fantasy about the two women being together, and I was like, okay, I don't want to read that. I don't want to read it whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. Okay, please no, I don't want that in my books that I'm reading, as far as like the descriptive sexual relations. Okay, I don't want that. Anyway, it was only like 2 or 3 lines, but it was descriptive, and I was just like, doesn't have to be in the book, okay? So yeah, as far as like homosexual content in books, as a Christian, I do believe that the Bible speaks against homosexuality. I also understand that the church has not handled these situations very well, and there are a lot of people who have been hurt by the church because of this. But this is my channel, and these are my beliefs, these are my convictions, and I will stand on them. I will always hope that I would treat anyone with the love and respect that they deserve as a human being made in the image of God. But I don't care for this kind of content in my books. And so for me personally, that is why this book did get some ratings dropped. There's not a lot of content about the homosexual activity, except for this one little 2 lines that all of a sudden were there that just kind of shocked me, of him having this fantasy. Just please no, I don't want it. So it was only that. Otherwise, it was just briefly described that these were the people that he was interviewing. This was their story. And part of the reason why he was interviewing them was because this conductor that was murdered was known to have, like, a lot of hate or distrust and dislike of homosexuals. And so that was like the main driving force as far as why he was interviewing these people, to see if they had anything to do with his murder. So that's pretty much it. As far as other content goes, there were several uses of the B word and the D word, just a couple times. So not heavy on the language, which I was actually grateful for. But it was just like the longer this book went, the more, like, the darker it became as far as who the conductor was and why he was murdered. It just got really dark. Like I said, the writing was beautiful. I loved the beginning. I was really invested in the story. I was like, this is great. I maybe found another author that I could read as far as the mystery goes, because it's not cozy mystery, but it's also not like thriller suspense type of books that's just like heart pounding, whatever, if that makes sense. I don't know. But yeah, the conductor was an awful man. There are several mentions of rape of really young girls, which is just terrible. And said girls getting pregnant and being forced to have an abortion and then dying from the backroom procedures because it was obviously not legal. Yeah, it's just a lot of just the dark content. And the longer I think about it, I did give it 3 stars, which is usually something that I like to give books that I just really enjoyed and would probably recommend, but I think I'm going to drop it down to even 2 stars because I don't know that I would recommend this book after all. Because while the writing was good, the mystery with it was interesting. I love the character as far, like the detective, Guido, for the most part. Like, I did laugh several times as far as his character and his relationship with his family, things like that. There are some good points in this book, but it was pretty dark towards the end, finding out who the conductor was and the life he lived. I don't know. It was just disappointing, is what I will have to say. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to pick up more of this series. I kind of want to, just to see if maybe some of the others are just not this dark and won't have the content that this one has, but I don't have high hopes because this was the first one in the series. I don't know. My daughter's crying, so we're gonna have to take a break. But anyway, there is that one, Death at La Fenice by Donna Leon. 2 stars. Don't really recommend. If you want to give it a shot, go for it. Anyway, we're gonna take a pause. Alright, we're back. Baby girl's awake. She's here in front of me, so you might hear her. But we have 2 more books to go, so we're just going to go ahead and try to finish this up here. The next one that I read was We Were the Lucky Ones by Georgia Hunter. This one actually fulfilled 2 prompts. It was Hey Y'all, a book with more than one POV, and Howdy Partner, a book featuring friendship or family. So this one follows the Kirk family, who was a Jewish family living in Poland at the time of when the Nazis took over, and they were then all pretty much separated. Most of them were separated to all different parts of the world, really, in that time when the Jews were being murdered during the Holocaust and everything. There are at least 4 or 5 different POVs. We're getting each story or each person's perspective in the timeline of when they were taken from their homes, and then where they were in this whole journey. I love that it's actually based on the author's family history. So she basically discovered some of these stories from her grandfather, and then just like cousins and everyone telling stories of her family history, and so then she wrote the book. I really loved it. 5 stars. It was heartbreaking again because of all of the hard things that they faced. It's a really beautiful story though, because the title, We Were the Lucky Ones, comes from the fact that every single one of the family members survived the war, survived the Holocaust and everything, which is truly amazing because there were so few that actually did. There were so many families who lost one or more members of their family, but they all survived. And so that was a comment that was made when they were telling the stories to the author. She just made the comment that we were the lucky ones because, yeah, they all survived and they all found each other again after the war, which was absolutely beautiful. I loved following all of the different stories and perspectives. There are a few like F-bombs and also the D word, but it's not super heavy. But that's pretty much the only like content warnings that this book has. I mean, obviously the hard things that all of the people faced during that time period, it was really difficult. As far as I can remember, I didn't write down in the notes that there was any other kind of content in this book other than the language. But anyway, it's, again, beautiful story, very heartbreaking and emotional, and again, this one just kind of brought to life the other aspect that I never really thought of until I became a mom, because we do follow one of the sisters, Helena. She is actually a mother. Her daughter is just a couple months, not even quite a year old, when they were like put into the ghetto, and so her daughter was really young but had very distinct memories of the things she saw and faced, of people getting shot in the head right in front of her, having to be hidden while her mom took her to work because they weren't allowed to bring their children to work with her, but there was no one to take care of her 1 to 2 year old little baby girl as she was growing up through the years, so she had to hide her in the work. Just like thinking about those things again, just like trying to imagine myself in those shoes with my precious little daughter, having to hide her and protect her from people who would just murder her just for no other reason except they were just evil humans who took delight in doing these things. Yeah, so some of those things were really hard to read. Again, it was just a good perspective shift because, yeah, for all of the hard things that we do face in our lives right now, for us personally, my daughter is safe. She's fed. She has a roof over her head. There aren't people bursting into our homes and driving us out and taking things from us and just treating us awfully, honestly. And so that is something to be very grateful for. But yeah, again, my heart just breaks for all of the moms everywhere who are actually living in those situations. Yeah, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine, right? Yeah. But I do highly recommend this one. It's a beautiful story. And I also love the fact that it was set, that this family was from Poland. I love Poland. And just like reading all of the different mentions of the cities and places, some of them of which I would have visited while I was there, which was really interesting. Highly recommend if you are interested in true stories. It is technically a fiction novel, but it's based off of true stories and true happenings that happened to the author's family. So there's that. And then the final book that I read, I seem to have a theme going on this month, reading all of the World War II stories. But anyway, the next one that I read, or the final book that I read in May, was The Italian Ballerina by Kristy Cambron. I can't talk today, folks. Wow. The Italian Ballerina by Kristy Cambron. This book, it is dual timeline. I did give it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I like the fact that it was set in Italy. We follow a little girl, like in the World War II time frame. We follow a little Jewish girl who was rescued by an American soldier, and there was also an English ballerina who was there in Italy at the time, who was working at a hospital trying to save Jews. So yeah, this one is dual timeline, and it jumps back and forth so much, which I'm finding I don't really love dual timeline. I can handle it if it's written well, but this sometimes it was a little hard to like jump back. And sorry, here's what was confusing. During the early, or like the historical timeline, it would jump in between different years from like the 1930s to the 1940s, and so that was a little harder to keep track of versus like, here's what happened in the historical timeline, here's what's happening in present day. Anyway, that's just a little personal complaint. It was a little hard to keep track of things. But in the present day, we are following Delaney Coleman, who lost her grandfather, and so there's someone in Italy who is requesting some of his personal belongings that they claim belongs to them. And like her family isn't aware of the things that happened while he was over in Italy serving during World War II. And so Delaney goes to Rome to find out what's happening with these people, why they're wanting her grandfather's belongings and things like that. And she meets Matteo, a handsome Italian, obviously. So we all know where that timeline is going. There is a little bit of a romance happening. But it's his grandmother who is the Italian ballerina, and she is the little girl that was rescued. I don't think those are spoilers. I don't really have too many more thoughts to say, which does that mean I need to drop the rating a little bit, because the details are already kind of lost to me. I enjoyed the story. It was good. It was fun. It was interesting. Didn't love, like I said, the dual timeline aspect. It was a little confusing to follow sometimes. And some of the characters that I was actually really interested in, it kind of felt like their stories just kind of ended and we didn't really find out really what happened to some of them, which was a little sad, but it was still a good story. I would recommend it if you enjoy World War II history, romance things, even though the romance is a little bit more on this. That's not the main point of the book, is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, there's that one. And those are the 6 books, or here are the 5 plus Aberration here that I read in May. Overall, I really did enjoy reading most of these books. And it was really fun to read physical books again, because most of my reading this year has been on the Kindle. I will say there were some books that if they were available from my library on Kindle, I was switching in between the physical book and the Kindle quite a bit, but there were a few of these that did not have them on Kindle, and so I read the physical books, which was really fun. I love actually holding books in my hand again. But anyway, there is the wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were on them, and also let me know what books you most enjoyed reading in the book of May. I would love to hear them. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.